Hey folks, welcome to yet another edition of Smarter Money Matters with me, your wealth doctor, Jeff Camarda, joined by our super CFPs, Lou and Anna. Thank you so much for watching. Today, as we approach the end of the year and are starting to think about smart tax moves before we have a new tax year, we'll continue in our discussion of Roth conversions. And why and how you might want to do this. Most people appreciate that Roth is tax-free, and traditional 401ks or IRAs or tax deferred, so you pay the tax later. So guys, you're getting a lot of, you always have a lot of interest in Roth conversions, but particularly at the end of the year. What's going on, with some of the Camarda clients you guys are working with?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely a topic of conversation now in our quarterly reviews as we're going towards the end of the year, and a lot of clients are asking about the process, what a Roth conversion is, or what it entails, and if it's something that they should consider for themselves and their families. Yeah,
and a lot of folks, kind of go about this. A lot of advisors, I think, sadly too, willy-nilly without doing the number crunching that really helps to drive an optimum result. And we'll get into some of what we think are best practices before the end of the video. Anna, you were telling us earlier you've got a really interesting and complicated case going on now. What's up with that?
Yeah, so one of our clients. They have an age gap in their relationship. So the husband is about 15 years older than his wife. She is, approaching the end of her career, and she has a pretty significant pre-tax, 401k and IRA balance. So while she's kind of moving back and working less as she ends her career and taking less income, we're doing a lot of planning around Roth conversions, trying to convert that as much of her accounts as they can while they're joint filers, and again trying to convert as much as possible before she has to start taking RMDs.
And that's really important because God forbid he passes on prematurely, but joint filers have much more favorable tax brackets than single folks, right? Is that part of what's driving their urgency?
Absolutely. So when we mapped out potentially what her RMDs could look like, just from her pre-tax accounts and all of the growth that she could expect over the next 15 years or so before she has to start RMDs, the amount would be extensive, right? The amount she would have to take out with her Social Security, if she was a single filer, would push her into the upper tax brackets.
Sure. And when we say RMDs, that's the amount, the required minimum distribution that tax law forces to come out each year and pay tax on. That's the reason.
Correct.
So you're saying it was pretty scary, which is why that she's looking to convert some of that to tax-free now to reduce the amount of taxable income in the future. Is that right?
Exactly. And then she wouldn't have even needed all of the money that the government would have required her to take out, right? Between Social Security and that, it would have been way too much income for her actual needs. Mm-hmm. So now if we do these conversions, the Roth money that we convert can keep growing for her tax-free. If she needs distributions from there, she can take it. But also, she has a lot more flexibility because she's not required to take it out.
And to the extent she doesn't need it, that leaves a much bigger tax-free pot for their heirs than otherwise.
Yes.
Because otherwise, that tax liability doesn't go away at death. If I die with, $2 million in that traditional IRA, the income tax still has to be paid on that $2 million. Since Secure Act 2, non-spousal beneficiaries, the best you get is 10-year stretch, right?
That's right.
Yes, but that's still a big liability. So if you're looking at 30% bracket, just have an even number, $2 million there, that's a $600,000 tax liability, which means there's only $1.4 million for the family, which is kind of what their objective is to increase that amount to the extent that she doesn't spend it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any similar comments in that?
Yeah. Actually, today I was on a call with a client. He has about $2 million, about $2.1 million in his IRAs, and he has 3 kids, and the 3 kids are doing pretty well financially. They have pretty solid salaries. So my client was saying, this is important for him. He wants to kind of figure out what's the sweet spot for him to convert every year going forward, because he wants to do it. He doesn't want his kids to have to pay the taxes, and he's looking at it in the future. Most likely taxes are probably going to go up. Tax brackets are probably going to get up higher sooner, right? At lower income levels. So he wants to do it now, and we're kind of we're doing a lot of planning around that. Obviously before December, before the end of the year.
Yeah, that's actually really. And if I'm not mistaken, the opportunity for Roth conversion ends at death. Right, so that's not something that
correct.
That I think
correct. It's a taxable event. You have to pay taxes for for all the amounts. It's essentially income, right? You take on income, but there's no limit.
Yeah, but if I'm the kid, right? So I inherit $1 million in a traditional IRA. I don't think I can pay the tax on that and then put the balance into a Roth IRA. I think it's going to have to go into a taxable account.
Correct,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So unless you have contribution room in your Roth account, which is a different story. But no, you can't.
Yeah, but that's not the IRA that I'm a beneficiary of will terminate. I can't do a Roth conversion there.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct.
So that's a really important point. So should we talk? That's really seminal in terms of the timing of this, because Roth conversions done properly, it's really a multi-year project, right? And the objective is, and to your point, expected tax rates in the future will be, we think, much higher for a lot of reasons. The U.S. fiscal deficit continues to get scary, when there's just, the government's going to need money. And we think tax rates will have to increase to be part of the solution for that. So the objective is really, when you do a Roth conversion, what you're doing is increasing your taxable income, and you're going to pay tax on that at your highest marginal rate, right? And the rates I think now are like 0% for so much, and then 15%. And then maybe 22%.
22, 24, I think 32. 30,
yeah. So the thing that to do this in a business like fashion, you want to figure out what's your maximum comfortable tax rate that you're willing to pay tax on. Right. Everybody's going to have a different number, and you can talk to us if you're Camarda clients or your other tax advisors. But you come up with a target bracket. In fact, we had a lady in here just a couple of days ago. That wants to do Roth conversion. She came because her tax advisor told her to talk to a financial advisor to solve a tax question, which is kind of interesting. But she had 0 taxable income last year. She should have taken a whole bunch, and she probably could have converted a good bunch of Roth into a Roth at a 0 bracket, and some at the 15% bracket. So you come up with what your objective, what your target maximum tax rate is, and say that's 22%. Mm-hmm. And then you look at, gee whiz, how much income do I already have? And maybe I'm already in the 22% bracket, but I can take another $15,000 of income before I go to 25, and I want to keep it under 25. And that gives you your target. I can convert $15,000 at 22%. I think that's a pretty good deal. And to really do this in a precise manner, something we've actually had this trademark with the U.S. Patent Office called the Rothalyze. And to do a really rigorous analysis, you'd go through and figure out how much, what your static income is. This is the amount that I'm going to have to pay tax on regardless. I got Social Security coming in, I can't change that. I've got some pension income coming in, I can't change that. I've got some interest coming in, gee whiz, maybe I could not have that in interest taxable investments, but put into something that's tax deferred, or maybe into qualified dividends at a lower tax bracket. I've got business. I own a business, and gee whiz, can I accelerate deductions this year or take less income out of the business? I've got rental properties, and can I look for more deductions? So you come up. These are the squishy things. After you figure out I can't change this, then I've got what can I do to adjust my bottom line income. And then how much headroom do I have from where I am now to fill up the maximum bracket that I'm comfortable with? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And to go through it that way, it sounds, well, hopefully it sounds simple, but in practice you really got to do, a lot of calculations, but that's the way to do it properly. And every year you go through this. This is the sort of thing that your tax advisor and our tax master division does this for tax clients that ask us to. Is to really do a pro forma return. Okay, this is what I got. These are baseline income items that I can't change. This is squishy. I can change this and change that. And this is what my tax return would look like this year based on those fixed items and those variables. And then how much more room? Okay, let me add $30,000 Roth conversion, $100,000 Roth, whatever, and then where does that go into software to tell me what the tax bracket is?
Yeah.
So do you have folks that kind of go through that? And I know we do the Roth process as part of the service we provide to our investment clients. You want to expand a little bit on that, Lou?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different factors that go into this calculation also, and one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is Medicare premiums that can be affected by your income levels. So you don't want to go too high in income, because that can affect your Medicare premiums as well. So
your point is, when you make that decision for how much additional income you can recognize in order to convert to Roth, right? That's going to have other ramifications,
certainly,
such as your Medicare costs.
Absolutely, and then the other thing that Anna pointed to earlier is if you have if you're filing your taxes jointly versus if one of the spouses eventually passes away, there's a huge difference how much more you can do while you're filing your taxes jointly as well, right? So that's another strategy that we try to kind of point out.
And that's a pretty complicated problem. Are you working with their tax advisor on that? Or are you doing the heavy lifting yourself? Or
they have a tax advisor, and then we did some projections using our financial planning software that we use to kind of look at different scenarios, right? And then they picked a tax rate that they were comfortable with. The husband, he's always like, he sees articles and he's like, hey, how can we do this faster? And I tell him, I'm like, listen, we have time on our side. We just have to slowly chip away at it. And that's the best way to handle this, rather than just, try and do it all in 1 year or something like that.
And we'll call him Harry. So Harry, is your objective to pay the least tax possible, or to get it done so you don't have to think about it, even if you pay twice as much tax?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is what he told him. He's like, no,
The
let's
least
take our
tax.
time with it, right?
Yes.
And that's an important consideration, is what is his life expectancy, or so you look at the complexity of this as you go out maybe 10 to 15 years, and if he's not healthy or he's got a disease or something like that, and you only get 5 years, that's going to change everything. And then you have to look at, okay, what I'll call her Harriet. What's Harriet's tax bracket going to be if Harry passes on in 5 years? Now when she's single or head of household, and that may argue for accelerating it, in order to get it in while you still have, the additional headroom with him as a joint filer.
Yeah, lots to consider.
Yeah. The important thing to remember is that, for calendar year taxpayers, which is virtually all of you, you have, this decision, these calculations you have to do every year. And as we record this in October, and folks that are serious about year-end tax planning, do the math now so you can get those conversions done before December 31st, because once that happens, the tax opportunity turns into a pumpkin, and you've lost the opportunity to get some cheap conversions at cheap tax rates this year. Any afterthoughts to that?
Yeah, no, definitely do it as early in December at least as possible. Once you have a pretty good grasp of what your income is going to be for the year, because even for us, when dealing with Schwab, they don't guarantee that stuff like this, conversions and distributions and whatnot is going to get processed as we get later towards the holiday season. So,
yeah, you want to make sure you get it out of time before you run out of time. Any afterthoughts from you?
No, just something to consider. And again, every year to continue to consider.
Yeah, and then the last thing, for you folks that really like to sharpen your pencils and keep them sharper, you may want to think, once the calendar turns next year, to start this process now and do that tax return pro forma. I've got this much Social Security. These are the fixed items that I can't change. This is where I can lower or increase my income to serve me, lower it, to give you more headroom for Roth conversions, increasing the amount of Roth, and then come up with a plan for the year. Because if you're converting, I guess they're not actually selling stuff. At the end of the year, the amount doesn't matter. But you might want to take advantage of conversions if you're selling stock when you have dips in the market and so forth, or dollar cost average conversions, because then that gives you the opportunity to doubly win by converting more shares at the same tax cost.
Yeah,
but perhaps that's for another edition. For now, thanks so much for watching Smarter Money Matters. It really does, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.